Matthew McConaughey was born in a small Texas town called Uvalde, a place far from the bright lights of Hollywood. But even as a child, people said there was something different about him. Something that made him stand out in a quiet way, like a spark that hadn't caught fire yet. His parents were strict but loving. His father, once a football player who later ran a gas station, and his mother, a teacher with strong opinions and big dreams for her sons. They raised their boys with discipline and toughness. And Matthew often said his dad taught him how to be a man, but behind that strong Texas image, there were family secrets and rules that weren't always kind. When growing up, he learned early how to perform, how to talk smooth, how to read people, and how to hide what he didn't want others to see. He was handsome, smart, and could charm almost anyone with a smile. But deep down, even as a teenager, he was already keeping parts of himself hidden, choosing carefully what to show to the world and what to keep locked inside. When he went to college, he didn't plan on becoming an actor. At first, he studied law, then switched to film, and somewhere along the way, almost by accident, he found himself in the right place at the right time. It was a bar in Austin where he met a casting director who was looking for someone with confidence, cool, and natural charm. And Matthew had all of that without even trying. That's how he got a small part in the movie Dazed and Confused. Just a few lines, really. But when he said, all right, something happened that no one expected. Suddenly, that line became legendary, and so did he. Almost overnight, people were asking, who is this guy? Where did he come from? And more importantly, what else can he do? Hollywood wanted more of him, and Matthew gave them exactly what they wanted. Romantic comedies, shirtless magazine covers, red carpet laughs, interviews full of strange wisdom and southern charm. He became the fun, relaxed guy everyone loved. The man who always had a story, a strange quote, or a grin that made the cameras light up. But what most people didn't see was that Matthew was also carefully building something. A public image that was warm, real, and deep, but also perfectly controlled. He wasn't just acting in movies. He was acting in real life too, hiding things he didn't want out there, protecting stories he didn't want told, and avoiding questions that got too close to something personal. Behind the laughter and smooth talk, there were questions he never fully answered, pieces of his past he never explained, and a side of himself that never made it into the spotlight. And those who knew him before the fame said he changed. Not completely, but enough to make them wonder if the Matthew they saw on screen was still the same Matthew from Texas. Some said he became more guarded, others said he started speaking in riddles, using strange phrases like, just keep living, that sounded deep but didn't always make sense. He started living a life full of mystery, and the more people praised him, the more he seemed to drift into something else, something harder to understand. He was no longer just an actor, he was becoming a brand, a symbol, a character. And the more people loved him, the more he seemed to disappear behind that character. But the truth is, Matthew McConaughey's story wasn't all golden. His family life had been full of chaos, arguments, secrets, and strange moments that shaped him in ways most fans never knew. His parents got divorced twice and remarried each other 3 times. His father passed away in a moment so bizarre that even Matthew shared it with a kind of eerie pride. He said his dad died during sex with his mom, something most people would keep private, but Matthew put it in his book like it was a story from a movie. And maybe that's how he learned to deal with pain. By turning it into a story, by controlling the way it was told, and by deciding which parts the audience was allowed to hear. But what happens when you build your life like a movie? What happens when the truth gets edited, rewritten, or left out completely? That's the question that started to grow around Matthew McConaughey as his fame grew bigger and his words became stranger. Fans admired him, but they also started to wonder, was he really this perfect mix of wisdom, charm, and peace? Or was there something else hiding underneath the surface? A secret that could change everything people believed about him. A truth that, if revealed, could break the illusion. Because even though Matthew looked like the guy who had it all, fame, love, money, and peace, those who looked a little deeper noticed the cracks. Not scandals on the surface, but quiet questions that refuse to go away. Questions about his past, his family, his strange connection to other celebrities, and the parts of his life he never quite explained. And in Hollywood, where secrets never stay buried forever, those whispers only grow louder with time. Because if there's one thing the industry knows, it's that every perfect story has a hidden chapter. And sometimes it's the chapter that was never supposed to be read. And when it comes to Matthew McConaughey, that hidden chapter might just hold the secret that could destroy the image he spent decades creating. The world sees him as the golden boy from Texas, the comeback king, the man who turned life into poetry. But what if that story isn't complete? What if something he buried in the past is finally starting to surface? Something real, something dark, something he never wanted anyone to find. And now, as more eyes turn toward his history, more people are beginning to ask, what is Matthew McConaughey really hiding? And what will happen when the truth finally comes out? After years of playing the smooth-talking, shirtless heartthrob in romantic comedies, Matthew McConaughey reached a point where people thought they had him figured out. He was the funny, carefree guy with a southern accent, always smiling, always charming, always full of strange quotes that made people laugh or pause. But what the world didn't see was that Matthew was getting tired. Tired of the same roles, tired of being typecast, and tired of playing a version of himself that didn't feel true anymore. Something inside him had changed. He disappeared from the spotlight for a while, quietly stepping back from Hollywood, leaving people to wonder if he was done. But then something unexpected happened. He came back, but not as the old Matthew. He returned in a way that shocked everyone. With his role in The Lincoln Lawyer, people saw a different man. He was serious, focused, intense. It wasn't just a better performance, it felt like a different person entirely. And then came Dallas Buyers Club, a film that didn't just bring him back, it redefined him. He lost over 40 pounds for the role, gave everything to the performance, and won the Oscar. That's when the world started calling it the McConaissance, a strange word for a strange moment in his life when he transformed from a romantic comedy actor into one of the most respected dramatic stars in Hollywood. He became a symbol of rebirth, a man who could change everything and come back stronger. But here's where things get strange, because while everyone was celebrating his success, something felt off. The more he talked in interviews, the more mysterious he became. His words were full of wisdom, but also full of confusion. He spoke about dreams, time, energy, God, purpose, big words that sometimes sounded deep, but also made people wonder what he was really trying to say. He started talking in circles, saying things that didn't always make sense but somehow still got applause. Some people thought he was brilliant, others thought he was hiding something, and the truth might be somewhere in between. Because while he was rising again in the public eye, carefully choosing new roles, writing a best-selling memoir, giving motivational speeches, and crafting an image of a wise man who had figured life out, those close to the industry started whispering. They said Matthew had become extremely careful, almost paranoid, about what he would say and what he wouldn't. Every interview was controlled, every answer was vague, every story had a lesson but never a raw truth. His words were always dressed up in style, but the emotions were sometimes locked away. It was like he had built a perfect mask, one that looked honest, spiritual, and peaceful. But behind it, there was still something hidden, and people began to ask, why? Why did a man who said he had nothing to hide seem so guarded? Why did a man who talked about truth never really speak about pain? It became clear that his public image had been carefully polished. Every detail, every line, every speech seemed rehearsed, almost too perfect. And in a town like Hollywood, when things are too perfect, people start digging. They look for what doesn't add up. They listen to what's not being said. And with Matthew, there were always missing pieces. He talked about faith, but not about the exact struggles that led him there. He talked about family, but never went too deep into the chaos that shaped his past. He talked about success, but never about the cost of pretending for so long. And what's more, there were moments in interviews where he would suddenly shift topics, avoid certain names, or give answers that didn't quite match past stories. that's when the rumors started to grow. Not wild scandals, but quiet questions. Was Matthew McConaughey telling the full story of who he really was? Or was he only giving the version that looked good in public? Some people who worked with him behind the scenes said he was more intense than people realized. That he was obsessed with control, with perfection, with making sure his legacy stayed clean. They said he was constantly rewriting his past, reshaping his future, and carefully walking a tightrope between truth and image. Even his memoir Green Lights, though powerful, felt like it left something out. The stories were colorful, exciting, sometimes unbelievable, but the emotions often felt distant, like someone remembering their life from behind a window. He talked about wild dreams, strange signs from the universe, and moments that changed his life, but rarely about the things that hurt him deeply. And those gaps, those silent spaces, made people suspicious. Because in Hollywood, everyone knows that the bigger the comeback, the darker the cost. The more someone shines, the more people want to know where the light is coming from and what's hiding in the shadows. So while Matthew was enjoying the peak of his career, a quiet tension was building. Some fans loved this new version of him, others missed the old one, and many were left wondering, who is the real Matthew McConaughey? Is he the wild Texas boy who dreamed big? The rom-com king who made millions smile? The Oscar-winning actor who shocked the world? Or is he someone we still don't fully know? Someone who has spent years building a wall of words around his true self. And if that wall ever comes down, what will we see? Because behind every carefully shaped comeback, there is usually a secret. And in Matthew's case, that secret may be closer than ever to being revealed. Not just a mistake, not just a scandal, but something personal, something buried, something that could explain why he works so hard to appear calm, deep, and at peace. Because no one works that hard to protect an image unless they're afraid of what might happen if the truth comes out. And as the camera keeps rolling and the world keeps listening, more people are starting to ask the question Matthew may not be ready to answer. What is he really hiding behind the words, the smile, and the legend of the McConaughey's? There are some stories that even fame cannot hide forever. And for Matthew McConaughey, that story begins not on a movie set or in an award speech, but inside his own family, where the truth was always a little complicated, a little strange, and maybe too dangerous to ever be fully understood. For years, Matthew has talked proudly about his Texas roots, his tough father, his strong mother, and the wild way he was raised. But what he never expected was that one simple joke, one offhand comment, would open a door to a secret he had kept buried for decades. In an interview, Woody Harrelson, one of Hollywood's most unpredictable stars and a longtime friend of Matthew's, made a strange remark. He said they had always felt like brothers, not just emotionally but physically. People laughed, but then he added something else, something that sounded more like a quiet warning than a joke. He said there had been rumors that they might actually be half-brothers. Suddenly, a moment that was supposed to be funny turned serious, and the world leaned in. What did he mean? Was there more to the story than anyone knew? Matthew didn't deny it. In fact, he admitted that even his own mother had once mentioned a time, a place, and a connection between her and Woody's father. And that was when everything started to unravel. Because now, it wasn't just a Hollywood friendship. It was a potential family scandal that had been hiding in plain sight. A secret that could rewrite everything Matthew thought he knew about himself, his past, and the name he had carried his whole life. Imagine living your entire life thinking you were one man's son, only to find out decades later that maybe you weren't. That maybe your father, the man who raised you, the man whose death shaped you, wasn't your real father after all. That your real father might have been a criminal, a man who went to jail, a man you never knew, but who had a strange dark history that few people talked about. That's the question Matthew now faces, and even though he has spoken about it briefly, the full truth is still unknown. A DNA test could answer everything. But Matthew has said he's not ready to take it yet, and that choice alone raises even more questions. What is he afraid of finding out? What is he trying to protect, not just for himself, but maybe for the memory of the father he believed in for so long? Because if the DNA test proves what many now suspect, the story of Matthew McConaughey would suddenly become something completely different. Not just a story of fame and talent, but a story of hidden identity, family lies, and a truth that was never meant to be public. It's the kind of twist you expect in a movie, not in real life. But for Matthew, this twist is real. And it might explain why he has always been so careful with his words, why he avoids certain topics, why his speeches sound like riddles, and why his smile sometimes looks like it's hiding more than it reveals. Because now we know there's something he's been carrying inside, something he's not sure he wants the world to see. Think about it. His whole life, Matthew has talked about his father like a hero, like the man who shaped him, taught him how to be strong, how to never give up, how to be a man. He even wrote about his father's death in his memoir, describing it in vivid, almost shocking detail, saying that his father died during sex with his mother and that he went out exactly how he wanted to. That story became famous. It was raw, strange, and unforgettable. But what if that story, like so many others in his life, was only part of the truth? What if it was a memory built on a belief that may not even be real? Because if Woody Harrelson is really his brother, then the man Matthew thought was his father might not be. And that is a kind of pain that can't be explained in a speech or a book. That's the kind of truth that can break a man quietly from the inside. And maybe that's why Matthew has started to speak more carefully, to protect himself, to keep the real pain hidden behind the calm voice and deep thoughts. Because if the world found out that his whole identity was based on something false, what would that mean for everything he had become? For the stories he told? For the image he built? For the way people saw him as a man of wisdom, truth, and peace? And that's where the mystery grows deeper. Because some people think Matthew already knows the truth and he's just choosing not to confirm it. Others believe he's still trying to figure it out himself, torn between what he feels and what the facts might show. And all of this is happening while the public watches, waiting, guessing, trying to read between the lines of his interviews, his books, his speeches. And still, no answer, just silence. And when someone stays that quiet about something so big, it makes the mystery louder. It makes people wonder, what else is he hiding? What else hasn't he told us? Because once a door opens to one secret, others tend to follow. And in Hollywood, where image is everything, even one truth can destroy a reputation that took a lifetime to build. For now, Matthew McConaughey is still the man the world admires. But underneath the fame, underneath the awards and the smiles lies a question that may never go away. Who is Matthew McConaughey really? And if the truth finally comes out, if the DNA is tested, if the results are revealed, will the world still see him the same way? Or will everything change in an instant? Because sometimes it's not a scandal in the news or a mistake on camera that can ruin someone. Sometimes it's the quiet truth they never wanted to face. And in Matthew's case, that truth might be waiting just beneath the surface, ready to destroy the story he spent his whole life telling. While fans around the world kept praising Matthew McConaughey for his charm, his deep thoughts, his powerful speeches, and his incredible rise to fame, something else was happening behind the scenes. Something quiet, something hidden, something that not everyone was brave enough to speak about. Because in Hollywood, people talk, but they do it in whispers, not shouts. They pass secrets in silence, behind closed doors, in late-night phone calls, and in strange, unfinished sentences. And when it comes to Matthew McConaughey, those whispers have only grown louder with time. People in the industry began noticing something that didn't quite feel right. At first, it was just small things. Moments when Matthew would give interviews and suddenly change the subject, or give answers that sounded wise but didn't really say anything. There were times when he would be asked about personal topics and his face would freeze for a split second before the smile returned. He was charming, yes, but sometimes too charming, too polished, like he had practiced every line in the mirror. Directors, co-stars, assistants, even makeup artists started noticing how carefully he controlled every part of his image. One former co-star said he never broke character, not even when the cameras stopped rolling. Another crew member said Matthew would sometimes go completely silent in between takes, walking in circles, eyes focused on nothing, like he was trying to escape something inside himself. But no one dared to say it out loud, because Matthew McConaughey wasn't just a movie star, he was a legend in the making, and in Hollywood, legends are protected. Still, there were rumors about the way he treated people when no one was watching, rumors about strange demands on set, unusual spiritual routines, and odd conversations that made people uncomfortable. A few brave insiders began to speak out, never directly, always carefully, saying that Matthew seemed to be hiding something more than just a family secret. They said he had built a wall around himself, and that wall was getting thicker. Some called it the mask. They said it was always there, even in interviews, even in award shows. One moment, he was laughing, full of life, and the next, his eyes went distant, like he wasn't really there. He would smile, but it didn't always reach his eyes. He would speak, but sometimes his words felt like riddles, not truths. And those who worked closest to him began to feel like they weren't seeing the real Matthew at all, just a version he wanted the world to see. One former publicist even said that working with him felt like managing a myth, not a man. And it makes you wonder, what was he so desperate to hide? What part of his life was too painful, too risky, too dangerous to reveal? And why were so many people in Hollywood afraid to ask him directly? Because here's the thing, when someone becomes too perfect in the public eye, it usually means something messy is being cleaned up behind the scenes. And with Matthew McConaughey, that mess was never out in the open. It was always just behind the curtain, just out of reach. But that didn't stop the questions. People began to re-watch old interviews, reading between the lines, noticing the awkward pauses, the sudden laughter that didn't feel real, the deep lines on his face when someone mentioned his past. And then there were the things that never made it into the press. The cancelled projects, the actors who quietly backed away from working with him again, the strange tension during film festivals, the private conversations that always ended with one warning: don't push too far. It was like everyone knew something, but no one was willing to say it. And in Hollywood, that's usually a sign that the secret is bigger than anyone wants to admit. Some insiders believe that Matthew's whole public image is a carefully designed creation, built piece by piece to cover up a truth that would shock his fans. Not a crime, not a scandal in the usual way, but something emotional, something deeply personal, something that might change how people feel about him forever. And when you look back at his career, you can see the shift, the moment when he stopped being the fun-loving rom-com star and became the deep, mysterious thinker. That change didn't just happen because of better scripts or good timing. It happened because something inside Matthew changed, something he never talks about, and the industry knows. They know there's more to the story than he's telling. They know the silence around his personal life isn't just about privacy, it's about protection. And when that much protection surrounds one man, people start digging. They look for anything, any sign, any crack in the mask. And slowly, those cracks are beginning to show, not in headlines, not in tabloids, but in the quiet spaces, in the strange way he avoids certain topics, in the people he no longer speaks to, in the way his smile sometimes fades too quickly, like he's remembering something he doesn't want to. Hollywood doesn't need a scandal to turn on someone. So sometimes all it takes is a secret. And the secret around Matthew McConaughey is growing more dangerous by the day. Because if the people closest to him start talking, really talking, his entire story could fall apart. The perfect man, the deep thinker, the family man, the comeback king, they could all disappear in a moment. And what would be left? A confused audience, a broken image, and a truth that was never supposed to come out. But here's the question that still remains. Why is he trying so hard to keep it hidden? And how long can he keep it hidden before someone finally says enough? Because the truth doesn't stay buried forever. Not in Hollywood, not when so many people are watching, waiting, listening. And if Matthew's truth ever comes out, it won't be a small story. It will be the story, the one that makes us question everything we thought we knew about him, the one that proves even the brightest stars can cast the darkest shadows. The most powerful secrets are not always loud, not always written in headlines or shouted in public, but sometimes they are the quiet ones that live deep inside a person, the kind that grow heavier over time until they can no longer be hidden. For Matthew McConaughey, the world still sees a man who has it all. A Hollywood star with charm, talent, and the gift of turning words into magic. A man who rose, fell, and then rose again, even stronger. A man who seems to know who he is. But behind that calm voice and confident smile, there is a story still unfolding, a truth that has been circling for years, getting closer to the surface, waiting to be told. And now that truth is harder than ever to keep buried, because the more people admire someone, the more curious they become about what's real and what's not. And with Matthew, the questions are no longer just whispers, they are everywhere. It started with a strange detail, a family mystery, a moment between friends that suddenly opened the door to something bigger. The rumor that Woody Harrelson might actually be his half-brother was just the beginning. That one rumor shook everything. It made people go back and look again at his childhood, at his parents, at the stories in his book, at the way he always avoided giving clear answers when things got too personal. But that's not the only secret. There are other things too, strange gaps in his timeline, people he never talks about anymore, projects that suddenly disappeared, relationships that ended without a reason, and a growing feeling that the Matthew we see in public is only a part of the man he really is. The people closest to him seem to know more, but they don't speak. They protect him, or maybe they protect themselves, because in Hollywood, silence is often the strongest form of loyalty. Still, there are signs that something is about to break. You can hear it in interviews. When Matthew is asked about his past and his eyes shift away, you can feel it in the way he answers deep questions with poetic lines that sound beautiful but say very little. You can see it in how carefully he moves now, how every word, every gesture, every story he tells feels like it was chosen with great care, like he is walking through a minefield of his own life, afraid to step on the truth. Because once a truth this big comes out, there's no going back. Once a secret is exposed, it becomes part of your name, part of your story, part of how the world remembers you. And for someone like Matthew McConaughey, whose entire image is built on honesty, wisdom, and soul-searching truth, even one hidden part of his life could bring everything crashing down. That's why this moment matters. This is not just about family rumors or private pain. This is about legacy, about the risk of losing everything you spent years building. Because if the truth comes out and it's something the world finds hard to accept, then the image Matthew worked so hard to protect could be destroyed in an instant. But the real question now is, what is that truth? Is it really just about who his real father is? Or is it something even deeper, something darker, something that explains the mystery he carries with him in every interview, every speech, every carefully written page of his memoir? People are starting to believe that Matthew has been hiding more than just a piece of his past. They believe he's been hiding who he truly is, that his public journey of self-discovery, his spiritual speeches, his carefully chosen words are not just for show, but also for survival. Because if people knew the full story, if they knew the part he never talks about, they might not forgive him so easily. They might not look at him the same way. And maybe that's what he fears the most. Not the truth itself, but the way the world will react once it hears it. Because in the age of the internet, nothing stays secret forever. All it takes is one leak, one person to speak out, one document to surface, and the truth will no longer be his to control. That's the danger of building life in the spotlight. You can't keep the shadows away forever. And with each passing day, the pressure grows. Friends are starting to ask harder questions. Journalists are digging deeper. Old friends are being contacted. And behind the scenes, Matthew must be wondering how much longer he can hold everything together. Because secrets have a way of slipping out, especially when they're heavy, especially when they were never meant to be kept for this long. And when they do, they don't just break the silence, they change the story forever. So now we wait. The world watches, listens, guesses. And Matthew? He keeps walking the same path, smiling, speaking, living, but always with a shadow just behind him. A shadow that might be made of memories or regret or truth. A shadow that grows longer every time someone asks, what is he really hiding? Because the truth isn't just close now, it's knocking at the door. And whether he's ready or not, one day he will have to answer. And when that day comes, when the secret that won't stay buried finally rises to the surface, the world will finally see the full picture of Matthew McConaughey. Not just the actor, not just the speaker, not just the symbol, but the man. And what they see may not be what they expected. It might be something more painful, more human, more real than the legend we were sold. And once that truth is known, there will only be one question left to ask. Will the world still love him, or will it turn away?